ample opportunity for you to lead anyway.
All right.
So, all right, we are live. Cool. That was, it's a good sign when it connects that quickly.
Yeah.
We've got debris on my screen that makes me look like I've got things on my face. It's kind of uncomfortable. But my face is clean, and they're not looking through this screen. They're looking through that camera,
Okay.
so it'll be all right.
All right.
So good morning, everybody. So Rachel and I are goofing off here, or I'm goofing off, and she's stuck with me. We've also got Heather in the room here this morning. So we've got a full crew, have a guest, have a producer. We're live from the Monmouth Studios here, and we got a long list of crap behind us. And this is going to be one of those episodes where my FSRs are going to be going, don't you have anything positive to say? Because
we're agronomists.
we talk about, okay, I'm glad it's not just me.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff here, and thanks for joining. Hope you have lots of questions. I could see this episode maybe going a little past an hour, depending on how deep we get. If we remember to talk about soybeans, we could get into the second hour.
You wrote
I wrote them
we
up
have
there.
A reminder.
I actually just wrote the word soybeans on the board to remind us not to forget soybeans, because there's bad things going on in soybeans too, not just corn. So we can talk about bad things in both of our crops. And from from tip back to diseases to stress to yield projections and crown rot and tar spot and everything going on out there. Now it's been interesting the last few days. So Jim Donnelly, a colleague of ours, Jim is for the furthest north, and Rachel is between Jim and I. And Jim sent out a text. Was that when was that? He sent.
I think it was either yesterday morning and the day before.
Yeah. So
this week.
Earlier this week, Jim sent out a text to just saying tar spot still sucks or something to that effect. And that's when I realized that Jim's got a lot of tar spot, which is not uncommon. And I've been surprised all year long and continue to be surprised how little tar spot I have. So I reached out to Rachel to see, since she's between Jim and I, is she more like me or more like Jim? Well, her area is more like Jim's with quite a bit of tar spot. And so I'm not sure where that line is.
So I actually went out to one of your plots here, not far from the Learning Center yesterday, and it was lower pressure than what I'm seeing in most of my geography. So I would say probably just north of Monmouth.
Was that like south of Knoxville, or which one?
No, that was like the one closest here.
Oh, okay. So like just
down the road.
Down the road from the church. Yep. Okay. So I guess I would say for me, from here south, I don't see much tar spot anyway. Lots of rust, lots of northern, lots of other things. So as you go north of here, what's you said you were going to Orion to look at some bad tar spots. So would that be about as far south as you've seen bad?
No, I'm trying to think. I think my plots around Viola and Alexis have maybe not quite as bad as what I have further north, but those have it as well. So, and I started finding it pretty early also.
Right.
So,
right. It would be interesting to, at the end of the year, when we figure out, where's the line between good and bad, look back at historical weather and see if we can pinpoint something that made the difference. We've all had lots of rain.
Yep.
We were all seeing tar spot, third week of June,
early,
probably. And I really, the only thing that wasn't perfect for it was kind of hot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the heat is what suppressed it. We've improved germplasm tolerance. A lot of the worst stuff nobody's planting anymore.
Right.
But you've got the same hybrids that are looking bad that I have that are looking good. So it's not genetic tolerance. There's something in the environment that prevented it from becoming as big a deal south. And I don't know if it was temperature or what, but I said earlier in the year, if tar spot does not get bad this year, then we don't understand this disease, because I was sure it was going to get bad. And for you and Jim, it has, but for me, it hasn't. And I think I've probably got more southern rust than you guys do, which is that's not really weird, because southern rust usually it's worse in the south, and as you go north, it's not as big a deal. It can be a problem in Wisconsin and northern Iowa and Minnesota, but it's not normally a northern Corn Belt issue, which is and kind of really weird. There's common rust too, that it has that name because it's always here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen some because you find everything. I don't know that I've seen any common this year. It's just like
it was rare.
It's either nothing or it's southern.
Yeah.
Is what I see. So common rust was uncommonly absent from this growing season, but that's about the only disease that was absent from this growing season. The rest of them you can find pretty readily, pretty easily, and actually at levels that are maybe actionable and maybe having an impact on the crop. Crown rot is one that I haven't seen, although Warrensburg's got some pretty good crown rot. We had a field day there yesterday.
We're trying to get it there.
Yeah. And now here at Monmouth, the last time I looked at my crown rot trial here, where I'm trying to get it, I didn't see much. And they've probably been drier through grain fill than we've been here. And I think that's one of the huge levers that needs to get pulled for crown rot to really be a big deal. Is you need stress during grain fill, and the only stress we've had and late grain fill rather than early grain fill, because early grain fill causes tip back and kernel abortion, and we'll talk about that too. But what makes crown rot the worst is you got that huge honking ear, and you keep every kernel. And then through R4, R5, R6, the plant's trying to fill every kernel, and it gets hot, it gets dry, it starts dying from tar spot, it starts dying from southern rust. And that's what causes the crown rot infection that's been in the roots for months, not really seemingly causing a lot of problems, starts causing lots and lots of problems. And that stress on stress on stress, typically there's drought and heat stress through grain fill, and I think that's what really flares it up. And we haven't had so far, at least in Rachel's area or mine. Her area has been even. I was talking to a guy in your territory who claimed he'd had this was prior to Monday night. They'd had like 6 or 7 inches just in August.
Yeah, there's spots where
which is crazy.
A lot.
We hadn't had any rain in August until Monday night on our farms, and we luckily got some nice rains. And Chris Bachman, I'm going to see if I can show this picture. Chris Bachman, one of my FSRs, his family farm is in the Minear area, and he has been missing. And Heather, at one time you had missed a lot of rain. Mm-hmm. So there are dry pockets around, but Chris pulled this up for me. If I get that to spin or not. So that's on his family's farm since the 20th of June.
It's pretty flat.
6.7 inches of rain. So that goes back all the way to so there's the beginning of the curve. So June 20th, and you can see that scale there. So most of my territory had 10 inches in July.
Yeah.
Had 4 or 5 in June, and has had something in August. And so there's a little pocket in Tazewell County that since the 20th of June has only managed to get 6.7 inches of rain, which is kind of crazy because you go to Bloomington, you go to Peoria, you go south to Lincoln. I mean, they're in an island there, and that's actually an extension of, there's a dry pocket in east central mm-hmm. Illinois, and there's a little tongue of that dry pocket that extends west almost to Havana that he's in the middle of. And so there are, and I was talking to several people at Warrensburg that had traveled into the field day that we had there yesterday. Should have been more people there, by the way. So next time you get invited to Warrensburg, please come. That were, talking about how dry it's gotten. Southern Illinois, I know, is dry, and that adds insult to injury to the growing season those poor guys have had. They got more than a year's worth of rain in 3 months in the spring, right? And now they need some of that, and you can't store up a year's worth of rain even in Monmouth, and you can't store up 2 weeks worth of rain in Southern Illinois. And so they always joke they're 2 weeks away from a drought. And so there's lots of places where the spigot has shut off, and since 1st of August, rain has not really been plentiful, and that's going to impact how soybeans finish. That's going to impact how corn finishes. Obviously, the diseases that Rachel's going to talk about here, are going to impact how corn finishes. Sounds like we're going to get very comfortably nice, some good fat boy weather coming up here. That's
I call it Grainville weather.
Yeah, I call it fat boy weather. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
same thing.
yeah. So it's so fat boys and corn like the same weather. Cool nights, cool days. And I was listening to a presentation here recently about the correlation between yield and number of days in grain fill. And the people that were presenting this information, they've got it calculated out to every day you add to your grain fill period, you add about 1.5 bushels of yield potential. Okay.
So what did they have a baseline they started on, like roughly a month?
Yeah. So their number was the average over 10 years was 56 days. From from flowering to
okay.
Yeah, not
I was thinking 5 to 6.
Yeah, no, this was the whole thing. So basically R1 to R6, 56 days would be their historical average, and it ranged from 40 some to 70 some days.
40 some would be scary.
Yeah, and we're not going to be that bad this year. I think 2012 was their year that was in the 40s.
I think we've made it past 40 days already.
Yeah,
I have to think through when I saw stuff like I think we're past that.
Yeah, so it was there's that, there's the heat in the night, and that's the other thing, that there's data out there. People have looked at this. We did have this isn't going to be like I don't think it's going to be the hottest summer, but you can find data that depends on where you're at and how you analyze it. We have had the hottest nights we've ever had during a growing season on an average. So it's not really the daytime. There's a lot of data to support this out there too that people have done over the years. When it's above 86 degrees, that's not a benefit to corn or soybeans. That their maximum growth rate is at about 86 degrees and sunny. We'll probably talk about clouds too at some point here this morning. So 86 degrees and bright sunshine and ample moisture is ideal growing conditions for corn. So when it's 94 and humid as hell and we're miserable, that's not helping that plant, but it's not that bad for the plant. What gets bad is when that 94 degree humid day turns into a 75 degree low night. And 70 is the line that Dr. Belo draws. 73 is kind of a more serious line, but nights above 70 and that would mean that it doesn't get below 70 that night, are very stressful for corn plants, and they use a lot of the energy that they produced the day before in photosynthesis to get through the hot night, and that's the respiration is the fancy term for that. And so you waste a lot of the energy that you produce that you could have, if it would have been 58 degrees that night and you were nice and comfortable and you didn't need to burn off a lot of energy in respiration, that would leave more of that sugar that you produced the day before to make corn, which is what we're trying to do. And so, and I think the cloudiness, the lack of solar radiation that people are talking about. So whether you want to blame it on a cloudy day because it was rainy, or you want to blame it on a Canadian wildfire smoke, or you want to blame it on fog, or you want to blame it on smoggy haze, humidity, we've had a lot of days when it wasn't really that bright sunny out. And so I think that's kind of an additive, double whammy, because if you're not photosynthesizing, at peak efficiency, and then you follow that with a hot night, you made less the day before and you use more to get through the night following that. And the end result of that is you're either going to have fewer kernels because you're going to have kernel abortion. And you've put out some good information lately on tip back, and I should shut up and let you talk about that. Or if that happens in later grain fill. I saw a really interesting study in a presentation the other day where they had put a shade over corn, a movable shade that blocked out 75% of the sunlight, which is pretty extreme. I would have done something a little less severe, but it did prove a point. And they did it at different growth stages, and then they kept moving it. And so they'd set it for 2 weeks over.
So hit R1, then hit R2,
yep,
et cetera. Okay.
Yep. And on multiple different hybrids, and then they tracked that through the growing season. And it was dramatic, as you would expect. And it was really interesting to see, the effect that had on that crop was dramatically different with every different stage of growth.
Okay.
So if you did it like pre-tassel through pollination, you had nothing. If you did it right after pollination, you had a unbelievable amount of tip back. If you did it later in grain fill, you had very, very small kernels, but you had a full ear of corn. And as you did it later in grain fill, the plant sacrificed itself more significantly. So the ones that had no grain on them basically were super healthy late. The ones that had a normal ear and no sunlight during like R4, R5, in that range, the plant killed itself trying to fill the ear. So it was just a really visual illustration of how, the timing of stress really impacts how the plant responds to that stress. And we've seen that with planting dates and different things this year. So why don't you tell us what you're seeing in that area?
What you were saying kind of goes back to what you had just said before about crown rot, that stress during grain fill, the last part of grain fill versus what we see early. So I did an agronomic update. If you haven't watched it and won it, I can make sure that you get that. But we did an agronomic update, Jim and I, a few weeks ago about tip back, because I was seeing quite a bit of tip back. I don't know if I can find one of those pictures. You guys probably all know what tip back looks like. Let me see if I can find one of my more dramatic pictures.
Yeah, I've had guys report to me that they had a 45 ear that tipped back to 30. So that would be a third of your ear, tipping back. Now the 30 long that you've still got left can make a lot of corn, but it looked a lot better when it was 45.
Yeah. So this is an example of what I've been seeing. And this was taken probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that corn looks not very far along, but you can see where it had kind of started to abort those kernels. Got really optimistic. I think I've seen that also. Our plants were really optimistic.
Yes. Yeah. I keep telling people, I'm sorry, but you were not going to hold on to that 18 by 45. That's just not going to happen. That's how many kernels is that? 18
too many.
That's like 800 probably. So keep talking. I'm doing math there.
I appreciate their optimism, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's borderline delusional. That's more than optimistic. So 18 by 45. So that's 810 kernels on an ear. Unless your name is David Hula, Randy Dowdy, or Kevin Kalb, you're probably not going to keep an 18 by 45 ear.
Yeah. So what I saw, I started looking at different plots at different planting dates. So I had one that was planted pretty early, April 14th-ish, 15th, and then one planted the end of April, and then I looked at one planted in May. And then I went back and pulled climate data on those. So I did an estimation of when it would be silking. We have GDUs to silk, and so I got out a GDU calculator and looked at when those products would have been silking versus what the weather was like. And it's not perfect. Do we have markers?
We do.
Oh, there you go. Still a marker. All right. So I looked at GDUs here. Make sure I can.
Don't try to get rid of the glare.
I'm not touching anything.
That's an inside joke.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
one time I was drawing a picture and there was a glare and she was trying. What you were adjusting something?
I was trying to move your
laptop. And she disconnected us. Yeah. And we learned
they could hear us.
And we learned that we actually reconnected and we were still live.
Oh, wow. So did
yeah.
they hear all the,
Yes.
Probably. I haven't got my,
no, they did because I got some comments.
Yeah. Oh, that's the best TV right there.
So I looked at at high temperatures, and high temperatures fluctuate kind of like that. And then I looked at low temperatures, and low temperatures, they were kind of all over the place, and they kind of started to get a little bit higher, and then they went back down because we had kind of a cool off. We had really hot, and I also mapped where we flowered, and so I had some that flowered right here, and then directly went into hot nights. And I had some that flowered over here and then went into hot nights. So this would be like my April 28th planting, where we went into very hot nights, and that's where I saw the most tip back. It wasn't heat during pollination. It was fine during pollination. But the closer you were to flowering to those really hot nights, that's when I saw more tip back.
And I would even wonder, and maybe we don't have this example, but do we have things that started flowering here, so it was actually going through pollination during the hot nights, but then didn't tip back because pollination wasn't necessarily negatively affected by the hot nights, but the ability to hang on to kernels that were previously or recently pollinated was.
So I would say I haven't looked at a plot that shows this, but anecdotally, when I look at when I'm out walking, I don't see as much here of that tip back. It's really this. And the other thing is that was kind of cool was, our plots, we have like 106 to 118. We have a pretty broad. I don't think I looked at any that have 103. I do have 103s out.
I got
I have 120s out, but I don't.
We got an April. Gary Shreves' plot. Gary. So that was planted April 29th, and it goes from 103 to 118.
Okay, so I would bet 118 had a more tip back than the 103.
The 103 had none. So it was, and the other thing I find interesting, I think my worst tip back in my territory is like May 5th to 10th planted. But
probably the flowering versus the nights is probably the same.
So your late April was probably at the same stage of growth as my early May. And so, the geography where you are, the maturity, the planting date, all that gets kind of, all balled up together. And so, that's going to change because basically if you looked at, like a 105, a 110, a 115, you might have that much range in how things aligned just based on maturity, and then you throw a planting date in on that too. And it just, people are going to walk in a field and they're going to see something, and then they're going to walk into another field and see something completely different. And is it the hybrid? Is it the planting date? Is it the weather in that field? Is it, what is it? But there's going to be a lot of, people are going to see a lot of variability, and whether it creates variability in yield or not, is yet to be determined, because I was just doing a little math here. So if you take a 16 by 40 ear, a 16 by 35 ear, and a 16 by 30 ear, and you assume, 34,000 ears, and you assume a factor of 80,000 kernels to make a bushel, the 16 by 40 ear is going to make 272. The 16 by 35 is 238, and the 16 by 30 is 204. I mean, it's just a straight line decrease, but that's not really the way it's going to work. And if you figure it takes an 80, if you use an 85 factor on the best ear, and an 80 factor on the medium ear, and a 75 factor on the poorest one, which is kind of the way it works in reality, the fewer kernels you have on an ear, the bigger they're going to be. That's just, can't get around that.
More food for those
kernels,
more to go around.
And so, we've the last 2 years, we've had phenomenal yields with a lot of 28, 30, 32 long ears. It's because the factor per bushel was about 60,000 on some of that stuff. We had just monstrously huge.
Don't get in a habit.
Don't use 60. Don't use 60.
Don't hear that's what you should use.
I know some of you guys had those 16 by 45 ears, and you were using like a 65, and you were going to set a new NCGA record. Now you were just sure of it, but I'm sorry, you're not going to. So what really happens is, and this may, there's been a lot of talk about tassel wrap and pollination issues this year, and some of what we got going on is going to maybe kind of hide a little bit of that problem, because if you had 800 kernels and you're going to tip back to 600 kernels because that's all the environment would let you fill. If you only started with 650 kernels instead of 800, you're still going back to 600. You're going to end up in the same spot. So, pollination is important, but what's more important is how many kernels can you fill? And it's not necessarily how many kernels you can fill. It's how much dry matter can you produce.
Yeah.
And if you had one big kernel that weighed a half a pound, or 600 kernels that added up to half a pound, the plant can only produce half a pound, and it doesn't necessarily care how many kernels there are to make that half a pound. Now they can only expand so much. So if you had an ear that only pollinated 250 kernels, you're going to lose yield there because they can't get that big to make up for that. But if you have an ear that has, this 16 by 30, we had a lot of 480 kernel ears last year that yielded 280 plus bushel. And the way you do that is with kernels that are so big and so heavy, it only takes 60,000 of them to give you 56 pounds of corn. And so these plants are going to compensate, and the fewer kernels you have, the bigger those kernels are going to be, the heavier those kernels are going to be, not test weight, but kernel weight. I'm going to stay out of that rabbit hole.
We don't have that time.
Yeah, right. That'll be in the third hour of Ask the Agronomist. We'll get a deep dive into test weight. And all you guys that think test weight has something to do with yield can throw things at me, and you can do that. I didn't get started on my math assignment here in time to have this all done, so I'm not going to take the time to finish it. But you can do this at home if you want to. You can actually calculate. So what factor? This will be a little bit of algebra here. What's the factor need to be on a 480 kernel ear to make it yield the same as the 640 kernel ear? And those factors that's attainable. If you have good conditions for late grain fill, which we're going into good conditions for late grain fill. Now we had crappy conditions right after pollination, and then we had, I would call it, average conditions through early grain fill. Now in late grain fill, for those of us who've been blessed with some moisture, and this cool down that's coming up, that's going to give us really good conditions for late grain fill, and that's going to help maintain whatever plant health we've got left, whatever plant health the diseases don't take from us. The stress level is going to be relatively low from an environmental standpoint. Now the diseases are going to increase the stress level. Basically the way I look at it is if you've got a plant that's infected with tar spot or southern rust and it's lost half of its leaf area, maybe more, or maybe more in some cases. I mean, that's a big stress. It doesn't matter if you've got great moisture. It doesn't matter if your nighttime temperatures are 50 degrees. It doesn't matter if the sun is bright. Now, it would be even worse if those things didn't. So I can't say it doesn't matter. But that alone is not going to save your crop if you've lost 50% or more of your leaf area, due to a foliar disease. And that's how the disease is going to interact with the environment. Is the disease is robbing photosynthetic capacity from the plant because it's destroying your leaf area. So since we're on the subject of disease, and since we have our resident pathology expert with us here today, give us a disease update, Rachel.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say tar spot, like Lance said, tar spot would be the one that I'm seeing the very most in my territory. I have Lance prepped me, asked me to find a couple pictures of very bad tar spot.
Yeah.
He knew that I was good for that.
Yeah, and I sent her a text this morning, knowing that it would be easy for her to say yes to this. I asked her if she had any recent pictures of really bad tar spots. So she brought some.
So let me grab those here. Oh, that one's really not that bad. I had these pulled up and then I went back to find my tip back pictures.
Yeah, I messed you up there.
That's all right. I can always find bad disease pictures. So that field was actually sprayed twice. You can see the lower canopy there is pretty crispy.
Yeah.
It's a very technical term. We got a crispy lower canopy there.
If you get that, one of the pictures you sent, the last one you sent me was a nice close up. So show them why that why that canopy's crispy there.
Yeah. So there's a good close up. Oh, there we go. There's a good close up of that, where you can see the disease is on the leaf, and it might be hard to see on your screen, but here, oh goodness, we're going to test my coordination.
I can't do it. I make a fool out of myself every time I try to do that.
So if you look at the green there, that tissue it looks green. There is so much tar spot on there.
Right.
It is everywhere on that leaf. It just hasn't returned brown yet.
Right. So talk about that a little bit. And I don't know that we know the answer to this, but it seems like there's a tipping point there at some point where you've got a green leaf covered with stroma.
Yep.
And the leaf is more green than dead.
Right.
But then 2 days later, the whole leaf is dead.
Right. At some point, it just flips and it's crispy.
And is that because there's a lot of infection that you can't see, or what do we know?
Yeah. So I guess I don't know for sure what it is. When tar spot first came out, there were actually, like in other geographies, like in Central America, there's 2 pathogens, and you have to have both of the pathogens present together as a complex to make what we call the fisheye. Here I'll blow that back.
It's where you've got like
where you have the brown around the black spot.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. But that hasn't held true in North America, or in the U.S. So we've had you can very much get the fisheye without ever being able to find that second pathogen. But so there's at some point you start to see those fisheye, and then it does just flip and turn very crispy. And I don't know that we know exactly why.
And that's, and I've learned this over the recent years, because, 5 years ago, before we knew that, or before I knew that, you could walk through corn that had a lot of lesions in it, but it was still green. And you thought, it's probably not good, but I can live with this.
Maybe like that.
Yeah.
It's covered.
Right.
But it's not crispy.
Right. And it's, there's still more. I mean, anything that's green on that leaf is helping that plant. And there's still a lot more green there than there is not green. And so you're thinking, well, that's not that bad. And then a few days later, that leaf is dead, and then you go, oh, well, how much longer is it going to be before the next leaf and the next leaf and the next leaf? And that's, that's why some of these late fungicide applications sometimes have huge benefits, because it keeps the rest of the plant alive. And the scary thing, the frustrating thing, and the thing we don't, it's hard to know what to do, is we don't know when it's going to flip, and it's going to go from a green leaf with black spots all over it to a dead leaf that's doing nothing to support that plant.
Yeah. And in my geography, if I was seeing this, like this picture that I showed, where there is a lot lower to mid canopy, if we were, as long as we weren't completely dented,
right,
I would say there was a good chance that we would see a positive return on that.
Right.
So in Northern Illinois, we've seen a nice return on stuff even sprayed, even at R5. So the beginning of R5, not the end of R5.
Right.
R5 is very long.
Yeah. And what is close to a month?
Yeah, about a month.
20 some days anyway. Yeah.
About a month.
Yeah. So when it's kind of like, it's a little hard for me to know, when you look at some hybrids don't really dent either. Mm-hmm. So, that dent stage is a little bit hard to judge, because you don't know how long it's been dented, and you don't know how much that hybrid is going to dent. And so if you're looking at like 6835 is pretty flinty, I think it doesn't get much of a dent. So I've looked at 6835 that was in the dent stage, but not really dented.
Right. If you're starting to see that milk line come down, that's a good indication. You're probably too far gone.
I meant to bring in ears to show milk
No.
line and talk about that.
Let me see if I husked back. I tried to take some pictures yesterday of some ears. Let me see if we can even
because
see
there is some
milk
black
line.
layered corn out there.
What?
You know, if you planted in the first half of April, an early-ish hybrid, you know, something sub 110, you know, it's probably pretty well mature, and you know, it's going to get uglier looking, but you know, you can't really do much damage to that plant because it's too close to completely developed. Now, if you've got, you know, 120-day corn planted the 10th of May, you know, that stuff's got a ways to go yet. And especially with this cool down, it's got the potential to pack a lot more dry matter into that kernel, assuming southern rust and tar spot doesn't prematurely kill it.
Yeah, I don't have. I was looking. I don't have a great picture of milk line.
Well, you know what I have? I have an FSR who's a better agronomist than I am, and I just got this from Chris Bachman.
Oh,
what? Because he's watching live and he texted it to me. So this is probably not going to show up great on screen here, but if you've got a good FSR like Chris Bachman, maybe he'll send that to you. So there is a lot, and there's you can find it on Google. Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah.
So that's about
106.
what, a little over half, probably half-ish milk line.
half-ish.
Yeah,
That's too far gone.
yeah, you're
That's
what,
done.
about 10 days from black layer maybe on that.
Probably.
That's some good silage corn there. So yeah, once you can start to track that milk line down, you know you're getting close to the end, and you if you were going to do something, you needed to have had it done.
Yeah.
I was talking to a producer today that he had a hybrid that he was a little bit worried about. It was 117-day corn, susceptible to southern rust, and he knew it was going to have to stand later, and so he wanted it sprayed again just to be safe.
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, so
I would do that.
So and that was 10 days ago, and he turned it in. And then what his dealer told him was, well, our planes are all in Iowa. If we can get one back, we'll spray it. And so today he remembered, oh crap, I don't know if that ever got sprayed or not, you know. And he was going to call, and I said, well, I hope it did. I think it was a good idea.
Sure.
But if it didn't, don't do it now, because I think it's too late now.
Yeah.
So good idea, but you know, if it didn't happen, don't figure, well, okay, I guess we'll still do it, because it's probably too late to be helpful.
Yeah, I've had multiple conversations last week, the week before, kind of, should I spray one more time? And in some cases, yes, I had some full season stuff that needed sprayed. I had a couple cases where we had a little bit of aphids and we had some tar spot, and we wanted to go spray those on really full season stuff. But also, like that one that I showed you, that was 106 day, and that it just doesn't make sense to spray something that far.
Right.
Other things that I've seen a lot of northern corn leaf blight, and you and I talked about that. You had some pretty. For me, I would say good pictures, bad pictures, whatever, however you want to, how you want to classify them.
Just so you know, when she says it's a good picture, that means your corn's dying.
It's not good. No, it's not good. So you had some pictures of northern corn leaf blight. I won't classify them as good or bad. They are pictures of northern, though. And I've seen that as well. I was out with a dealer actually, and he made me. He went out of his way to drive me past a field with really bad northern that you could see along the edge of the field.
So that's what I would classify as bad northern. That is a susceptible hybrid from somebody else, and I don't honestly know if that field got sprayed with fungicide, but if it did, that edge did not. And I think too, I see the same thing with rust. And is it because of the spores moving through the air that the edge is just getting hammered?
And
so that's normal.
You'll see that in research plots. You know, you have the alleyways, a little bit of a 3-foot gap between, and you can walk down there and just find all the southern rust you would ever want to see. Yeah. And you walk into the plot, and it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
So that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
On northern, I would say that it's favored by kind of cooler temperatures.
Right.
We're going to have cooler temperatures. You know, back when I was in research.
Is it sporulating and reinfecting?
So it's reinfecting.
Does that too?
Yeah, it has multiple cycles. back when I would do disease trainings and disease demos and stuff, Northern was my very favorite thing to inoculate for, because you could always get it. And it would, it would make these huge lesions, and it would just continue to grow on susceptible hybrids. And so then it was very, very visual. Whereas gray leaf spot sometimes was hit or miss on whether you got it. Northern, and those lesions expand so quickly on that susceptible germplasm that you'd have a beautiful example of very, very dead. I'm going the wrong way. Very dead and very green.
This thing is left and right. I'm not confused.
My brain doesn't.
I don't understand that way. I don't understand how it works.
No.
So it's I thought you might like this one too. So I went to get. I knew of a field that had really good southern rust in it, but it's also got some nice northern lesions, showing up
starting
in there.
Yeah.
So there's leaves, and that's in the upper canopy. That's way above the ear. So that thing is loaded with southern rust, but it's got some nice little northern lesions coming in there too. And I've been surprised at how much northern's out there, because as you mentioned, it likes cool weather. And I'm saying I've got less tar spot than I thought I would, because maybe it was too hot. Well, apparently it wasn't too hot for the northern, because the northern has really, taken off in susceptible germplasm. Now, northern is a disease that I would say there's a wide range in resistance to northern, more than there is to tar spot, probably maybe even more than there is to southern rust.
Yeah, I think so.
You can have hybrids that are damn near immune to northern, and you can have some, like the picture I showed you, that are highly susceptible to northern. And so you can have dramatic differences in how much northern you see just because of the hybrid, and southern rust too, to a certain extent, because we've got very good southern rust hybrids and we've got pretty bad southern rust hybrids. So there's a pretty broad range. With tar spot, you go from kind of bad to bad is kind of the range you get with tar spot. So it's a little bit tighter range.
Yeah. So on northern, I would say as you're out, in a lot of cases, especially for Lance's geography, you're past that spray time frame, right?
Yeah.
My geography, we're getting very, very close, and I have a lot of fields that are past that time where I would make a recommendation to spray. But for northern, as you're going out there, I think it's important to see what you have in your field and evaluate that, so that you're not blaming the wrong thing. There is a good chance if you have bad northern, it could be mistaken for, you could look at the lower canopy and think it was tar spot, potentially just because those leaves are going to be completely brown and crispy. You could look at it and potentially think that it was crown rot or anthracnose, just because the upper canopy, those leaves are going to start turning very, very brown, and it's going to have a dead look. So,
and when in years when we have goss, it's very easy to mistake goss for that too. That's one thing I haven't seen this year.
Somebody told me I had a little bit in Henry County, not on, it was like from a different brand, but they had found a little bit.
How about bacterial leaf streak? Have you seen any of that?
I've seen a little bit, not near as much as I saw last year.
Do you have a good picture of that on you?
Ooh.
Well, you're looking for that, because that's one that I need to, and I'm trying to learn a little bit here. I'm using you guys so I can learn from Rachel, because I don't know that I would correctly identify a bacterial leaf streak, but I did get my math homework done while Rachel was talking. So this is kind of cool. So if you take those 3 ears, and those ears had 640, 560, and 480 kernels on them, and using the same divisor or the same kernel factor of 80,000, the yield went 272, 238, 204. So if you tweak it just 5,000 kernels per, so if you use 85 on the big ear, 80 on the medium ear, and 75 on the small ear, then your yields go 256, 238, 218. So they come a lot closer. And then I just started going down, so if I used a 70 factor on the small ear, it's up to 233. If I use a 65 factor on the small ear, it's up to 251. And if I use a 60 factor, which last year 60 would have been the right factor on a lot of ears, it's 272. So it's ironic, and I didn't know it was going to work out this way, but a 16 by 40 with an 80,000 factor and a 16 by 30 with a 60 yield exactly the same, 272. And that's how that corn plant compensates for how many kernels it has. And if you've got healthy corn if you've got cool nights, if you're not done with grain fill and you've got good moisture, that plant is still packing dry matter, every day into those kernels. And if you've got ears that aren't as big as they once were because of tip back or because of a pollination issue, if you want to be optimistic, and that Bachman, this is me being optimistic. If you want to be optimistic, you can make those kernels big enough that you'll get the same yield as the guy that had the bigger ear.
And really, I mean, again, we joked about TAs not ever being optimistic, but I do think that we have a chance for optimism here. My geography, we have plenty of moisture, maybe almost too much moisture from a disease perspective, but plenty of moisture for grain fill, very, very good grain fill weather coming up. If you have a clean upper canopy or a cleaner, I haven't seen a clean upper canopy doesn't exist in my geography, a cleaner upper canopy, you do have some potential there. So I don't think that we need to look at just the, sheer kernel count and be really down in the dumps right now.
That's, and I get critical sometimes, too critical probably. I've got people that like to go out at like milk stage, or maybe even sometimes earlier than milk stage, and start doing yield checks.
My eyes aren't that good.
Yeah, it's that's a little crazy, just because it's a lot of work and it's hot out there and it's kind of miserable. And I love you that you want to do it, but if you get within 40 bushel of the right yield, that's just dumb luck, because you don't have any idea what kind of. There's some apps out there that. Oh
yeah, I've heard of them.
It's crazy. It basically gives you three options. If you have a normal, a good, or a below average grain fill weather, and it gives you a yield range from like 215 to 360 or something stupid like that. I can also do that. A farmer sent that to me one time, and he sent me this a screenshot of this, and I said I could get that close setting in my living room, because that's where I'm at, and so so that and it's all because we don't know what the factor is going to be. That factor could be 100,000 kernels to make 56 pounds of grain. It could be 55,000 kernels to make, and that changes your yield by half. It doubles it or cuts it in half. You can literally take 200 to 400 or take 200 to 100 just by playing with the factor. So
yeah, I get asked sometimes what factor I use, and I kind of jokingly respond that I attempt to not do yield checks because they're always wrong. But it's hard. It's impossible to.
Yeah, I mean, almost every standard formula that I've ever seen uses 90.
And I think that's usually wrong.
And 90 is uber conservative normally. I mean, unless you've got crown rot killing your plant before black layer, or southern rust or tar spot killing your plant before black layer. I don't even know if it would have to be some sort of premature death. I don't even think in a severe drought, we'd get to 90.
Frost, maybe.
Frost, yeah. Well, yeah. Again, and you're prematurely killing the plant. So, for it to be more than 90 on modern hybrids, something disastrous would have to happen. So if you're using 90, that's pretty conservative. But if you used 60 last year, don't use 60 this year. This is going to be closer to an 80 or 85 year, I think, than a 60 or 70 year. And at the end of the year, I mean, and I know guys that do this. They've taken a lot of ear samples. They know what their what their kernel count was. And so if you pull enough ear samples that you know that, hey, I got a pretty good handle on what my ear size was, and what your actual yield is in the end, you can back calculate what was my factor. And some people go to the effort to do that, and then they try to use that learning to do a better job estimating yield in the future based on what's happened in the past. And that's a little dangerous, because I mean, the factor can vary widely from one year to the next.
By planting date, by field.
Row number throws it off hugely. I mean, any girthy ear has a huge advantage in yield checks, but a girthy ear usually does not out yield a slender ear, because it's got more kernels on it and they're smaller. And so you got to use a different factor. So I sometimes tell guys, if you got a 14 ear, a 70 or 75 factor doesn't bother me. If you've got a 20 ear, you can't use a 70 or 75 factor, because a 20 around ear is going to have smaller kernels. I don't care how many times you spray fungicide on it, or how much fertilizer you put on it, or how intensively you manage it. If you've got more kernels, they're going to be smaller. It's just the way it works.
Yeah, you can easily go out and see that now. I was out trying to take some pictures for some presentations, and you can see that the 14 around has giant kernels the size of my thumb.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
it's pretty easy. If you want an illustration, go find a 20 and a 14 and
right. Yeah. It's very easy for a 20 and a 14 to yield the same. And any formula is going to say the 20 is going to kick the 14's ass. And it might happen, but it doesn't happen the way the formula is going to say it's going to happen, because you need to, if you get a little more detailed about it and you change your factor, use a smaller factor on the 14, use a bigger factor on the 20, that's going to get you closer. But we still don't know, we know this. We know the 14 needs a smaller factor than the 20.
But we don't know
don't know what that factor is. And so
yeah.
I think we had a question come in, Heather.
Yes, this was a while ago. Merle was wondering if you've seen an increase in corn smut on your list. So
yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to tee that up with Rachel, maybe.
Yeah. So I would say I've been seeing more smut. Thanks for the question. A disease question. I love it.
Oh yeah. Oh, Merle's great. He's
Merle.
he's always got good questions.
So I've been seeing more smut. I actually saw it fairly early this season. I think actually Chris Bachman, speaking of very good FSRs, Chris sent me a photo very early in the season showing some on the leaf. We saw some. Saw it kind of looked bubbly, like where you've taken some like spray foam or something and put it on the leaf. Yeah, that's what it looks to me like. Yeah. Take some spray foam, put it on a leaf. That's smut early on.
And I saw a lot of it in feeding scars from stink bugs.
Yep.
So you have your 3 little holes there, and then the holes kind of started to elongate, and it was kind of cool looking. And I've seen a lot of smut this year, but I'm seeing less on the ear than I did last year.
I'm seeing some on the nodes.
Okay. Yes, I've seen that.
Yep. Yeah, you see it on the nodes. I've seen it on the leaves.
Will that make a weak spot there, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's like my number one concern. We have all these other things that I think are going to contribute to potential standability issues, but I think that probably would be a slightly weak, but smut needs a wound to get in. So it's pretty, there's some pathogens that are very aggressive. Southern rust is a really good aggressive pathogen. It's going to reproduce very quickly. Smut is a pretty lazy pathogen. It needs a wound to even get started. And so I think early on we had just enough wind. We had enough stink bug feeding. We had sandblasting. We had all the things where it doesn't sound that bad. Wind doesn't sound terrible, but if you think about it, you just need a tiny nick on that. In some cases, I think where we were wrapped up really tight from rapid growth, and those leaves kind of start to unfurl. And if you look at the edges of those leaves, they're very crinkled when they start to unfurl, but you can also see little tiny nicks where they've kind of unfurled. And that I found one. I don't know if I probably wouldn't be able to find that picture where you could kind of see the crinkling and then you could see the smut right next to it. And I think that may have been the wound. So I am seeing a lot of smut. If it's not in the ear, if it's in the ear, that's a loss of an ear.
Yeah,
and that's bad.
It's a barren plant then.
But I'm not seeing as much in the ear, and so I don't worry as much about it.
We had some fields last year that I would say probably had 5 to 10% barren plants because of smut.
Yeah.
And you raised a smut ball on those plants rather than an ear. But you can see it in the tassel, you can see it in the ear, you can see it on the leaves, you can see it on the stalk. But there seems to be less, and I assume it's probably just timing, maybe why it's less on the ear this year.
Yeah, so it's where what was wrapped, what tissue was growing at the point of infection. And so if we didn't have the wound when that ear was developing, that would be what it is. Yeah. So it's the growth, what tissue is rapidly dividing.
Did you find your bacterial?
I did. Yeah. So speaking of other diseases that are out there that I'm not super worried about. We have a lot of other things. So this is from last year, and it's kind of hard to see it, I guess. But
it looks a little like gray.
That's what I was going to say. It looks, if you walk out into a field, this was upper canopy, and it looks like it has gray leaf spot top to bottom, especially in the upper canopy. Put the sunlight behind it, and it will kind of have that yellowish, halo-ish kind of effect. That is bacterial leaf streak. I had a dealer actually text me another photo here.
Because does it stay between the veins perfectly, two straight sides?
It's not perfect.
It's
so
not
here's, this is one of my dealers sent me this. He heard us talking about it. So you can see that kind of up close.
Yeah,
there.
That's beautiful there.
I know, isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to turn you into a plant pathologist.
You could like frame that and hang that on the wall.
I know, that's modern art.
It is.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Dying corn is modern art. So.
That's right. So that was from last year. I've seen it this year. I'm not seeing it near as much. That's another one that it's bacterial. Your fungicide is not going to do anything for you. It's there. I don't think that it has a significant impact on yield. Further west, Nebraska, Kansas, Western Iowa, they have that a lot of years, and they don't really see a negative impact on it. There's genetic differences, but not to the point where we could rate for those genetic differences. We can't get it reliably. So it is there, but on my list of things that I'm worried about this year, it falls pretty low as well.
So a couple other things on the list of things to be worried about, but maybe lower than other things we've talked about. Physoderma is bad, I would say. Bad for what's relative to normal.
Right.
It's not bad compared to southern rust. It's not bad compared to tar spot. But there is a lot of physoderma out there, and probably I've seen probably the ugliest physoderma that I've ever seen. And I have found some node breakage. You will find occasionally a plant that's snapped off at the node. It's hard for me I don't fit between corn stalks very well walking through a field, and if the big agronomist is walking through across the rows, and every now and then you hear one go pop.
You're a physo finder.
I am. I'll find it where it's not even there, because sometimes I'll break a perfectly healthy one. But if you're going through the field and you hear one pop, stop and look at it. And if it broke, and it kind of broke cleanly, and especially if it broke off completely right at the node, and that node is girdled with a black lesion around the node, highly likely that was a physoderma plant. Will you generally, I think, find a lot of leaf symptoms on that plant too, or not always?
Not always.
Okay.
So you can see, you can have pretty bad breakage without having a lot of symptomology on the leaf, and you can have a lot of it on the leaf and not really have the node breakage. So if you see one, it means the conditions were conducive for that.
Right.
So you could potentially see the other, but it doesn't mean that you're going to see it. We had a lot of fields with pretty heavy physoderma on the leaves.
Yes.
And I don't want you to panic thinking that all of those are going to turn into node breakage. So there's there's a genetic element there as well, to where some things are less prone to node breakage than others.
So is the node infection a separate infection that happens later versus the whorl stage infection?
I don't think it's a separate infection, but it has to have infection at the node and at the leaf.
Okay.
So I don't think it's not like it moves from the leaf to the node.
Right.
So you have to have, the actively growing tissue at the node at the right time when conditions are conducive. So you can see those two separately.
And that's, your comments on, timing and conditions, that's why we don't really recommend fungicides. As people have asked me, well, when should I spray if I want to try to control physoderma? It would be early. But I think that infection is probably happening in, 6 and 10-hour, 12-hour windows, when you've got, water in the whorl and the right temperature and the right conditions and the pathogens there. And, even if we said, somewhere between V7 and V9, maybe, if you wanted to pick a range, that might be when I think V5 is too early. I don't see any thing that makes me think that V5s are suppressing physoderma. And I don't know that we even know what has efficacy on the pathogen, do we?
So there has been a little bit of data. I want to say Iowa State, but I'm not sure it was Iowa State. I know we partnered with Iowa State on Physoderma several years ago. There's a little bit of data showing that you can reduce infection if you get at the right stage there very early.
Okay.
From a leaf standpoint, I don't know that I care that much about reducing infection. So I think that I would rather have a V5 fungicide for a lot of other reasons.
Right.
And if it helps a little bit with Physoderma, that's a nice bonus.
Right.
But I don't think that it's that big of a deal.
Right.
And I don't know that I think that was the leaf, if I remember right, that was the leaf symptomology rather than the node breakage. The node breakage is what I'm worried about.
Right.
They've also done some screening. Again, we partnered with Iowa State on some stuff, and there's been screening to where we had, when did we start talking about this? Like 2016, 2017, something. They kind of did some screening, and we had a few pretty susceptible parents, and they've gone through and kind of figured out where we have some parents that lead to susceptibility and reduce those so that we don't, essentially just try kind of shifting our germplasm to where we have a lot healthier. So yeah, we're seeing it, but if we had those in a year like this, if we had those very susceptible hybrids out there, you and I would be talking, be more worked up over it.
Right. And it's, I always assumed, it sounds like incorrectly, that there would be a correlation in the more severe the leaf symptomology and the more prevalent the leaf symptomology, the more likely you would be to find node breakage. You don't necessarily think that's true?
So not necessarily. Again, I mean, it means that you had good conditions for it. So there's a chance, there's potential, but you can see one without seeing a ton of the other.
Okay.
But if you are seeing a lot of it on the leaf, go out and take a look.
Right.
And if you don't want to be incredibly destructive and push plants over, you can also kind of just you can, and it's a good way to know. But if you peel back that leaf sheath on those lower nodes, you can kind of start to see where, like right around the node, there's going to be kind of some dark, blackish, kind of rust colored spores. And in a lot of cases, starting, about now, I went out and looked at a field that had some pretty bad Physoderma maybe at the beginning of last week or so maybe 10 days ago. And it was just starting to show spores there. And so you can actually rub off those spores. And they're about the color of like common rust. So southern rust, very, very bright orange. Common rust is that dull brick orange and or red, I guess, brick red.
Right.
And Physoderma is about that color. So right at the node, rub right there at the node. And in a lot of cases, you'll be able to rub those spores off. And that's a good indication that you have Physoderma.
So I'm going to let you comment on this before I show it. So this plant was broke off.
Okay.
But it didn't break at the node.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's kind of a little bit Physoderma looking, but it's not at the node. But that is at the node,
that's very much
also
Physoderma.
Looks very much Physoderma. So would you be comfortable saying that's a Physoderma plant?
I think so.
And I don't know whether it's Physoderma that caused it to break there or not, because that's a little.
That's not normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that would be kind of what you're looking for at the node.
So, there we go.
Oh.
So right there, that's more typical of Physoderma, where you see it. Oh, here, Heather found something from the Crop Protection Network. That's like a classic Physoderma breakage.
That almost looks photoshopped.
That's just plant pathologists love to go out, and we have thousands of these photos, and we'll find a perfect one.
Yeah.
So that's from the Crop Protection Network there, and you can see on the. Oh goodness!
Man, you're really impressing me with that.
So
she must be a
right
mom.
there on the,
moms can do anything.
You see that where that dark right around the node where it broke, those are the spores, and that's what would rub off. So you would be able to take your finger, kind of rub there on the nodes, and you would be able to get some spores, and that would be a good indication.
She likes to get spores. I don't usually have patience to try to find spores. It sounds difficult.
No, it's super easy.
That's when I call in the expert. How about aphids? So we'll shift over to
okay.
aphids. They're out there too. Probably this is more normal for aphids to show up, late in the season. Last year was really weird because they were here in huge numbers, actually before tassel. We kind of missed them that early, and it was generally after tasseling when people were scouting for fungicide that they realized, wow, there's a lot of aphids out here, and we had a lot of aborted ears. We had ears that we're not talking about a little bit of tip back. We're talking half the ear died, or in some severe cases, the whole ear died, and you ended up with essentially a barren plant. Now we didn't have as many of them earlier in the season. But I would say probably about 2 weeks ago, I started getting calls
I started getting those calls
on aphids, and I've seen plants that the lower canopy is just covered with honeydew and slimy, and you wouldn't want to walk through there.
No.
And I haven't seen any plants completely covered like they were last year, and the timing, they're not going to be able to do as much damage at this time. Even if the plant was completely covered, they wouldn't be able to do as much damage now because you're not going to abort the whole ear at this stage. You're just going to make your kernels shallower if the plant's under stress. So I don't know how much of an impact they're having. I also don't think we'd probably get good enough coverage down that low to even kill them if you tried to. I did have a report that was kind of interesting. I had a guy who sprayed twice, used an insecticide both times, but it was not an aphid insecticide, and he's got lots of aphids.
I've walked fields like that too.
And it's probably more common in your area and Jim's area that people are using insecticide in corn because they're trying to kill some rootworm beetles.
For beetles.
And I kind of am becoming a bit of a bit of an insecticide hater in corn. Unless it's really necessary, because I think in some cases, I think we're actually making aphids worse by using insecticides that control everything but the aphids. And that's a good day to be an aphid if all the predators are now dead and the only thing left in the field is aphids.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've had the question more, what should I have done differently? Is sort of where it goes usually. And if you are going to do it, I do think that there's definitely cases where we need to continue to spray for beetles in Northern Illinois.
Yep.
But look for something that has good efficacy on both.
Right.
And that might not be your cheapest product. I don't think that it's going to.
It's not going to be.
Yeah.
It'll be like 3 or 4 times your cheapest product.
You don't have to. I'm not saying to use that super expensive. There's some pretty expensive ones out there. I'm not saying that we need to use those.
But it might be a $10 treatment instead of a $3 treatment.
Yeah. So
something like that.
If we're throwing it in, let's throw it in and make sure that we're picking something that's going to be effective on multiple pests. There is what I'm thinking.
And I talked to a producer. They obviously had aphid trouble last year, like everybody did. They had been using insecticide routinely with corn fungicide, just like we always recommend on soybeans. And 2 years in a row prior to 2024, they thought they had a lot of aphids. And so they quit using their insecticide, with their corn fungicide because they felt they were creating an aphid problem. Well, then last year, even without using insecticide, they had a lot of aphids because everybody had a lot of aphids. But I do think there is, and the entomologists talk about this, and we're actually cautioned sternly by aphid experts about don't treat for aphids unless you really, really, really have to, because it is easier to kill everything else than it is to kill the aphid. And if you do that, they can reproduce so fast, and you can, if you spray and you kill 30% of the aphids, all you did was make them mad, and they're gonna repopulate. And a couple weeks after you sprayed, you might have more aphids than you did when you sprayed. So it's kind of it's frustrating. You want to protect your crop, and sometimes you have to, but you need to use a little bit of restraint and not do it unless you have to. And to Rachel's point, if you have to, you have to use a product that's going to be good on aphids. And if you've got aphids out there and you go with the cheapest thing you can buy and it doesn't do anything to aphids, which I would say most, and there are some products that based on the classic chemistry that's in the product, I'm highly suspicious it's going to control aphids, but it does have aphids on the label.
I think you can put it on the label, and there's various efficacies.
Yes.
Even for fungicide is the same.
Yes.
Just because it's labeled doesn't mean it's the
herbicides
most,
too. I mean,
that's true.
and I would say the herbicide labels are probably the most real because it's easy to see you didn't kill a weed.
Yeah, and you have the visual.
And it's easy to have to pay for a respray if you didn't kill a weed, right, Heather? Yeah. So I would say with weed control, if it says it controls the weed, it probably does. With insecticides, if it says it controls the insect, it might. And with fungicide, I mean, until there were some labels that had diplodia on them until it became a thing, and once it became a thing, it came off the label because when it was pretty obvious that it wasn't preventing diplodia. So I would say, look at multiple sources of information, and if you've got a pyrethroid that has aphids on the label, I would be asking some hard questions of the supplier of that product before I trusted it to control aphids.
Yeah. So for fungicide, the Crop Protection Network, it's academics, and they put out a fungicide efficacy chart, and I think that's fairly accurate. And that I use that, I reference that a lot. I don't know. Is there any such thing? I don't know. As we're talking about this, I'll look at Heather.
Oh, look at it. She's
working on it.
She's on it.
Yeah, because I would kind of love to find that. I use the fungicide chart all the time.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll see if we have one of those. Maybe you can bring that up.
That's a good resource. So I just remembered the reason I wrote soybeans on the board was so we didn't forget soybeans. So wow, we're already 20 minutes over an hour. Can you believe that? Gee gosh. I really hope you people are enjoying this because we're having a good time here. So soybeans, obviously there's white mold. There's a lot of sudden death, less than I would have expected, frankly. I've had people say, well, wow, are you surprised at how much sudden death we're seeing? I'm like, we had 10 inches of rain in July. Yeah. We planted all these beans in April. I can't believe any of them are alive. We had really good conditions for SDS. And to me, it's not that bad because I didn't see any until, early August. And usually when SDS is going to be disastrous, you're finding it in July. And a lot of the beans I look at with SDS, the pods are pretty full on a lot of the plants. So even if it died tomorrow, 75% of your yield is probably there. It's going to hurt. It's never helpful, but I don't consider it to be that bad. Red crown rot it is concerning that it has been positively identified in some new places for me. So we've had some positive identifications in Fulton County. We've had positive identifications in Hancock County.
It's getting very close to me.
Yeah. It's at me. So, and the other thing, I was talking to an agronomist yesterday at Warrensburg, and he indicated to me that he had a lot of plants that he was uncertain whether it was red crown rot or not, and it didn't have the classic red crown rot look. Terry Hughes did a great job yesterday at Warrensburg, by the way. She made me feel you would have liked it.
Disappointed I missed that.
I've honestly been a little bit concerned that, maybe we're not keeping up with the Joneses on red crown rot, and are we? And Terry made me feel really good that we're doing some good stuff.
A lot of trials on that. Yeah.
It sounds like her inoculum might be a little hot on her assays because she's just killing everything.
Smoking everything. That can happen.
Yeah, and I was reminded that was the way we were with diplodia for a long time too. We couldn't come up with a diplodia assay that didn't infect 100% of what we infected. But anyway, I have a little bit of a theory that the pathogen that's causing red crown rot, I won't try to say it. Terry was saying that there's different pronunciations of it, and when you look at the word, it makes a lot of sense because it's worse than my last name. I wouldn't want to try to say that word.
Even the one that causes rust, Jim and I argue constantly about how to pronounce that one too. So it's universal. Nobody can pronounce those correctly.
Yep. So anyway, sometimes I think, we've talked about this with crown rot and other diseases. If you send a sample into a lab, there's going to be more than one thing there. And the assay that the labs do can't tell you what was there first, and they really can't even tell you what's the biggest problem the plant's got. And so, one of the samples that I sent in that I suspected might be red crown rot, they found red crown rot, brown stem rot, and charcoal rot, ironically, which was kind of an odd mix of diseases.
Interesting.
The beans were dead, but they didn't really look like anything in particular. But, I wanted to rule out red crown rot. And unfortunately, the sample confirmed it and didn't rule it out. So I don't know if those plants died of red crown rot or with red crown rot. But the pathogen was present. Other pathogens were present. And I've looked at some of those university maps of where it's been positively identified. And I've kind of thought, well, I've never seen it in most of those counties. Right. But maybe you could get it out of an assay, that the pathogen was there. So it's been observed in a lot of new areas this year. So it does feel like it is, getting to be more prevalent, and that's concerning because it's a pretty devastating disease and has the ability to. Terry talked about how fast and what an aggressive, basically a better root rotter than Pythium or Phytophthora or sudden death. Yeah. And how fast it can go. And so, we call sudden death sudden because it kills the plant, quickly.
It feels like it.
Red crown rot has, it's kind of like SDS on steroids. It just does, it looks like, the foliar leaf symptoms. I mean, that's crazy. I won't find it, but I'll tell you what it was. One of my biggest pet peeves is I get pictures all the time of an SDS looking leaf.
No
and somebody says, "What's this?" And what are we up to? Like 6 things now that can make a leaf that looks like that. So you got to do a lot of other diagnostics. And the other thing I really learned from Terry that I had not heard this previously, the red pustules that sometimes form from red crown rot, that's the sexual reproductive stage that sometimes never appears.
You won't see it.
And even when it does appear, it's not there very long. And that's so right. Everybody's looking for the reddish orange pustules, and a lot of times they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of people tell me, well, I thought maybe it might be red crown rot, but there's no orange pustules there, no red pustules, and that's unfortunately it might still be red crown rot.
Yeah. The other thing, did she talk about? There's like a saprophytic kind of fungi that is kind of orangey. And
yes.
And that can be, I mean, I've gotten a couple pictures of that where I'm like, that's right. You can actually see that most years. It's just that now we're actually looking for it.
Right.
And so we see it and get worked up.
Right. And
different colors.
Saprophytic fungi, for those of you who are non-pathologists, that's just a fungus that's consuming dead tissue in your field. Something killed your plant. The saprophytic fungi is devouring the tissue, and it produces some orange colored stuff that somebody might think is red crown rot.
Go out at harvest. You'll probably see a little bit of that someplace.
Right.
Don't freak out. That's not red crown rot.
Right. But that was a good talk yesterday at the Warrensburg Field Day was on red crown rot. And there's a lot of work being done by universities, by seed companies. Terry did mention that, nobody's really found anything that they feel is truly resistant in the what's the glycine max is soybean, right?
Yeah.
Glycine soja is like wild type soybean. Okay. So we're currently screening glycine soja wild type to look probably more like morning glories than like soybeans, trying to find resistance, because in glycine max nobody's found resistance. That's
not what I wanted to hear. Actually.
Yeah. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that on YouTube. I don't know, but it's so anyway. There's work being done. Seed treatments have some benefit. She did say that I didn't realize this. sure you knew this. There's a sclerotia involved in that, just like white mold.
Yeah.
But it's not near as tough and durable as white mold.
That's good.
So it does not persist in the soil as long.
Okay.
And I asked her a question that she really liked. I said, well, how about like the biological products that can degrade the white mold sclerotia? Because that kind of works. It helps anyway. It helps. And she didn't know if anybody had ever tried that
so maybe that would be another. Yeah. I mean, I think so. Your message of lack of resistance isn't very positive, but I do think that it's positive. I know that's how we are, but I do think there's some positivity there in that there's other avenues there that we can, from a management standpoint, that we're exploring.
And I will also say too, and I kind of challenged Terry a little bit that, that's based on her assay, which is killing everything. And I said, well, we know from field observations that there are varietal differences, at least to the above ground and the above ground symptoms. So, and she also thought it was probably potentially much like sudden death. You could have lines that didn't show the leaf symptoms, but yet the roots are still destroyed.
Yeah.
So, it could be that there are varying levels of susceptibility, and we're just overwhelming the system with our assay. So she was going to play around with that as well. But a lot of work being done on red crown rot. But unfortunately, a lot of people are seeing it for the first time in their soybeans, and it is going to continue to probably be a thing. And we don't really, the nice thing about SDS is there's, it has kind of a soil environment that it likes, and if you're
cool, wet.
If you're farming crappy timber soil, you're probably never going to have SDS. It likes the high organic matter soils. Terry didn't,
we probably
don't know that they have really observed any sort of, planting date doesn't necessarily influence it as much. It actually likes warmer soils.
I feel like you can find data right now, because it's early. You can find data that shows dramatically, like it directly contradicts each other.
Right.
And it's just because it's early on, and that's how it works, is we collect a whole bunch of data, and I feel like that's the stage that we're at, is just collecting as much as we can and
so if
trying to make it make sense.
If you've got beans that look like they've got SDS, they probably do. If you send a sample in to somebody, they're going to find SDS and probably other things, and they may find red crown rot. And if that happens, I don't think that's the end of soybeans on your farm, but just be aware that it is it does feel like it's expanding each year. And the areas where it's been bad in the past, they're still struggling with it. They've some guys have rotated away from beans to continuous corn on some bad fields in Pike County, where they've been just every time it was in beans, it was bad. So eventually you go, well, I guess I'll just grow corn, and that creates other issues. And so we'll continue to do work on that. Let's see, did we get through? We probably should quit talking, because we've gone a long time.
You gotta get.
They say, I got to get through it. Yeah, I got to get to St. Louis, and they say these videos are supposed to be like 2 to 3 minutes, and I've always said that's ridiculous. Anybody who's only got a 2 or 3 minute attention span, I don't know that I care. And I won't say the name of the company, but I told somebody the other day that those people plant other kinds of corn if they've only got a 2 or 3 minute attention span. So that's their problem. But anyway, thanks for see, we've still got people here, so it's it makes my heart warm that we've got people here after over an hour and a half of Ask the Agronomist. So thank you, Rachel, for joining.
Always fun. Thanks for having me.
You always improve the content significantly. Heather, thank you for coming in. So I had a full crew here today. We'll be back in a couple weeks. I don't even know when that is. Heather, when is a couple weeks?
Oh, geez.
What is today? The 21st?
It's September 4th.
September 4th. Okay. So that you might be starting to pick corn that day in parts of my territory. So anyway, we'll actually I have I might have a field day that morning, actually, now that I think of it. But we'll do this before the field day, so that'll be okay. So, all right. So we'll be back with you September 4th. And thanks again for sticking with us. And everybody stay safe, enjoy the cooler weather, and making the most out of your late grain fill.